And if everybody could mute themselves so that nothing comes across in the tape, that would be great. And then you can unmute yourself at the end and ask tons of questions.
So,
Yeah,
Sarah,
so the way, so sorry, Carolyn, go ahead.
is anyone still in the admitting room?
No, no, then we'll see if they are. And if you could mute yourself, Carolyn, that'd be good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So the way we're going to run this is I'm going to go through some of the big issues in this presentation, and probably do that without taking questions, just so I can get through it quickly and be mindful of everyone's time. But then we're going to have as much time as people want for questions, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. And the whole point of this is to be helpful to you in in saving money for your towns, your schools in particular, and your residents. And power, those are the two words are going to define this morning: money and power. Money for your residents, money for your town, and saving money on the bills for just about everyone. And then power, particularly power for municipalities, cities, and towns to push back against gas companies, gas pipe companies, who are often ripping up the streets without any regard to what the town's concerns are, and putting in gas pipelines. I saw this. I testified last week on Beacon Hill in favor of some of these bills. And as I was driving up Beacon Hill towards the State House, there is a massive track excavator ripping up Beacon Street. Thank you, ripping up Beacon Street and putting in you've probably seen this, these big, bright yellow natural gas pipelines. Those bright yellow pipelines will last 75 years. 75 years. But by law, we must be off gas in 25 years by 2050. So the rights for towns to push back on gas companies and make them give you a plan for the streets, and give a plan to decarbonize houses on that street. In other words, get those houses onto heat pumps, solar panels, and better insulation. Is part of what these bills are all about. So let's go to the next slide, Sarah. And I'll try to move through this fairly quickly. Um, but some of this does get a little technical. I'm a bit technical myself, so I tend to get distracted a little bit into some of the details. So please stop me if I'm not making any sense. And we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. I will stay on as long as it takes for everyone to get their questions answered. So if you've got a question today, you will get an answer. So there are five bills which make up our campaign of Save Money with Clean Heat. Two of them I'm going to talk about today. The five all really work together, but the two that directly impact municipalities, well, the two we'll talk about here: an act relative to municipal voices, that's the title of the bill, in gas utility work, and then the tactical transition to affordable clean thermal energy, filed by Senator Cynthia Cream, which really empowers towns to establish large solar panel arrays, for instance, on the roofs of schools and over their parking lots. But we'll get to these all in turn. Let's go, Sarah. So we talked about money and power. And money, as I mentioned, is really money, saving money, $2,500 every year to the average homeowner in Massachusetts, as a resident, but also through their towns. And their towns have, of course, electric bills and gas bills and oil bills as well. And so for a school, for instance, a typical school, I live in Dover, Massachusetts. We have a regional high school. And just a very rough estimate is that the Dover-Sherburne Regional High School system could save about $250,000 a year on their heating and electric bills, with these legislative bills we're talking about today. Now, $250,000 is a lot of money. And for instance, it could be a new AP math teacher for the school, or a new counseling and support program, or something like that. So this is very real and will make a big difference to towns and cities' budgets. That's on the money side. Then the power side, this is kind of a little joke. It's like electrical power from solar panels, but it's also political power, having the ability to push back on gas utilities in particular, for the towns, and it's probably most of you that have significant natural gas. There are some towns in Massachusetts that don't have natural gas, particularly in the Berkshires, and even my town actually doesn't have very much natural gas. But the vast majority of towns have natural gas running through pipes in the streets that are regularly ripped up and replaced. That do not need to be replaced; they should be repaired. Okay, let's go, Sarah. So this is the first one, municipal voices. So this bill was filed by Senator Cream in the Senate and Rep. Armini in the House, and really requires the gas companies to do three things. First one is to inform municipalities in advance when they're going to rip up the streets. Today, the utility companies do whatever they want, really, regardless of what the town says. Towns have no ability to push back on this; they just have to accept whatever the gas company says. This new power will allow towns to appeal to a hearing in front of the DPU, which the towns do not have this right today. And the DPU will be the ultimate arbiter between the town and the gas company in a face-off or a dispute between the two. And the DPU is generally very favorably disposed towards towns and very not very favorably disposed towards the gas utilities. So the gas utility companies are not really going to want to have the DPU decide what should be done. So this is a major new power to towns contained in this bill, the Municipal Voices Bill. The second thing is the gas companies must now provide a 4-year plan for all the street work. Today they just show up and with a track excavator and dig up the streets. With this bill, they will have to provide a 4-year plan, street by street by street, saying these are the pipes we plan to repair or replace in the next few years, giving the towns time to plan. And make alternative plans, which the gas companies will now be required to do. For instance, they will be required to evaluate whether it makes more financial sense to install a new gas pipe or to convert the houses on that street to heat pumps and solar panels. So that's the first major step forward in decarbonizing Massachusetts and getting us off fossil fuels and onto cheap, clean heat from heat pumps and solar powered electricity, which is so cheap that heating with a heat pump today on solar powered electricity is going to cost you less than heating on natural gas. So in some ways, you can see this as a natural extension of the 2024 climate bill, which in theory put some of these new powers in the hands of towns, but in practice did not. And this is the teeth, really, putting the teeth into the 2024 climate bill to give the towns the authority to combat the moves by the gas utilities in particular, and to force them to plan and also to provide a 25-year plan. It's actually not in this bill, it's another bill. I'll come back to it in a minute. The gas companies are now going to be required to have a 25-year plan to get off gas entirely. Right now, they're ripping up the streets and putting in those big yellow pipes like I saw on Beacon Hill, as though gas is going to be here forever, when it isn't, because it's already the law that we must be off fossil fuels by 2025. I'm sorry, 2050, in 25 years' time. Let's go, Sarah. So there are some very difficult economics here, which is very important to understand why the gas companies want to dig up the streets and put in new pipes. It's because they charge us $3 million for every mile of new gas pipeline. That's those big yellow pipes that last 70 years. But we've got to be off gas by 2050 or 25 years' time. Most gas companies, so most pipes can be repaired, and the repair will last 10, 20, or 30 years for about 100,000 per mile. So $3 million per mile. You would think that most companies would prefer to spend far less and repair the pipe rather than spend $3 million per mile and replace the pipe. But it's not true for gas utilities. They always prefer the highest cost solution. Yes, you heard me correctly. They always prefer the highest cost solution because they make a profit regulated to 9% of their assets, which is mostly those pipes. They make a profit of 9% on the dollar value of the pipes they own. So they would always prefer to rip up the streets and put in a brand new gas pipe that's going to last forever because that's the most expensive option on which they make the most profit. Whereas if they repair the pipe, they make far less profit than they would if they're going to replace the pipe. And this is why new legislation is required. If you're thinking about, well, how did this evolve? How did this happen? Well, when the gas pipeline system is expanding and people are expecting it to last forever, this is not a ridiculous way to manage the utility companies. But we're in a different world now. The world in which the old regime works, when the gas network is expanding continually, and we're expecting gas to be used forever, is okay. But we're in a different world now, where gas usage is going to be declining. Um, as people electrify their homes with heat pumps and solar panels, and that will eventually get us off gas for heating homes. But the utility companies are still being managed to the old regime, which is make as much profit as they can by putting as much expense into the ground, and that means new pipes, not replacement pipes, not repairing the pipes. Sorry. Okay, let's keep going, Sarah. Okay, so that was the first bill about municipal voices. The second bill called Tactical Transition. Um, and this also filed by Senator Cream and Armini and Owens in the House. It's called the Tactical Transition to Affordable Clean Thermal Energy. The key thing here, I think, is affordable. We all know that gas bills have gone through the roof. This year, electric bills seem to be rising inexorably. And so affordability has become the key word really to describe any legislation regarding energy. It's really affordability is the key issue of the day. So what this does is it empowers towns and cities to establish what are called clean energy utilities. You may hear the acronym CEU being bandied around for clean energy utilities. And this provides towns the ability to provide community source solar and or network geothermal to their residents. I'm going to focus mostly on community source solar because it's very real and it's very now, whereas network geothermal is a bit more speculative, and I think it's further in the future. So the best example to think about this is solar panels on the roof of a school. Most schools have large flat buildings in full sun. The Dover-Sherburne High School system, for instance, has about 3 acres of flat roofs and another 7 acres of flat parking lots that could easily be covered in solar panels, as schools have started to do now. Um, Unfortunately, schools are blocked by an existing law that prevents them from transferring their excess credits to residents, and I'll come to that in a minute. But let's just look at schools here. This is a good couple of pictures here of on the left solar panels over parking lots, and on the right solar panels on the flat roofs. Many schools look like this: big parking lots in full sun, big flat roofs in full sun. And a typical school could accommodate between 5,000 and 15,000 kilowatts of solar panels. Now, these numbers get very big and very, I think, kind of difficult to grasp very quickly. But just for comparison, the roof of an average house can accommodate about 15 kilowatts. The roof above my head here has a 15 kilowatt array on it, on my house. But a school can do between 300 and 1,000 times as much power. Clearly, it's much cheaper to install once on one big roofed school building than it is to install it on 1,000 individual homes. So it's far more cost effective to do this on one big school, and you can do the equivalent of 300 to 1,000 homes with one school. The Dover-Sherburne High School system is actually it's actually the high school and the middle school combined. And it's for obviously two towns, Dover and Sherburne. But just a rough calculation is that solar panels on the parking lot and the roofs of the schools there could generate enough electricity to power half of the town of Dover. So this is big. This makes a huge impact on the carbon emissions of homes in the towns, and has a huge impact on the bills because let's go to the next slide, Sarah. Because solar panels are dirt cheap. They generate electricity dirt cheap today. The solar panels on the roof above my head here generate power at about 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And I am paying, well, I'm not really paying anymore, but I used to pay 35 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity from Eversource or National Grid. This is a huge discount from 35 cents per kilowatt hour to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, that's for a residential rate. Today, it's possible that towns may end up paying a bit more because they have government contracting rules and things like that. But let's just say for giving a wide margin of safety, suppose the town transfers that cheap, clean solar power to its residents at 15 cents per kilowatt hour. That is still a 50% to 60% reduction in everybody's electric bill. This has been done a few times in towns. In fact, Dover, Massachusetts is one of them. Dover capped off its town dump about 10 years ago and put solar panels over the town dump and used half of that cheap solar power to offset the bills at the high school, and the other half was transferred to residents in town. Churches do this today. Second Dorchester Church in Dorchester, downtown, is a big old church, has solar panels on the roof, and it transfers the excess net metering credits to the low-income members of the congregation. There are companies that do this today. The biggest and best known in Massachusetts is called Nexamp, Nexamp. I use it on a house that we own that is the roof is too chopped up for solar panels. And that gives you about a 12.5% discount off Eversource basic rate. But although individuals like me, churches like Second Dorchester, and companies can do this, towns are banned from doing this. And that's why this legislation is needed to permit towns to transfer their excess net metering credits to their residents and cut everyone's bills. The average homeowner would save about $1,000 a year, roughly halving their electric bill. That's a big deal. And that's if you just stay with the current electric bill and the current electric usage. If you add heat pumps, which use electricity rather than natural gas or heating oil, then your electricity usage goes up, and the average homeowner would then save $2,500 every year, not just $1,000 a year, if they get cheap electricity and they add heat pumps to replace their fossil fuel furnace. Now, if the town transfers it at 15 cents per kilowatt hour and it's costing it 10 cents, the town can actually be making that money in that difference between 10 and 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and this becomes a revenue stream for the town. This is not without precedent. There are about 40 towns within Massachusetts that have MLPs, or municipal light and power plants, where they run their own electrical distribution system, independent of National Grid or Eversource. Wellesley is the closest town to us that has an MLP, and the MLP is owned by the town, and it's profitable. It sells electricity at about 17 cents per kilowatt hour, half that of Eversource and National Grid, and every year it makes a profit, and that profit is turned over to the town, so it's part of the town budget every year. So this works in both making money for the town directly and saving money for the town as well. That becomes just a town decision how they want to manage that surplus. Next slide, please, Sarah. So let me just give you an example of how awful this can become. The Mendon-Upton regional school system is a bit like the Dover-Sherburne one. Two towns have their own, have one high school. And the citizens of Mendon and Upton raised money to install solar panel arrays, and they generate more solar power than they use. So they get credits, the same as me as an individual, from my arrays, and they've built up nearly $100,000 in solar credits. National Grid is their utility. National Grid refuses to pay for that excess solar that has been contributed to the grid for nothing. National Grid has not paid anything for this. Now, by law, they are permitted to say no. This is the problem. National Grid can legally take that excess solar power, which they get for nothing, they pay nothing for it, and then they sell it back to the residents of Mendon and Upton for 35 cents per kilowatt hour. Okay? That's because towns are prohibited today from transferring the clean power, that $99,000 worth of solar credits, to its own residents who paid for it in the first place. These bills permit towns to transfer that cheap, clean solar power to residents, and they also open up lift the caps currently existing on the amount of solar power that can be added to the Massachusetts grid, which is necessary to get towns to be able to add big solar panel arrays, for instance, on schools. It can be on anything. It could be on town land, or it could be on the transfer station, other town buildings, etc., like a community center. It can be anywhere, but schools are just a really good example of how this works very well. Next one, please, Sarah. So there's a lot of benefits in this to municipalities, cities, and towns. Firstly, cities and towns gain power over the gas companies to really push back and have that hearing in front of the DPU if there is a disagreement, forcing the towns and cities forcing the gas companies to provide a 4-year plan in advance for the replacement and repair of the gas pipelines and to provide a 25-year plan to actually get off natural gas entirely. That isn't quite as devastating as it sounds because most gas in Massachusetts is delivered by Eversource and National Grid, and they have both electric businesses and natural gas businesses. And as the natural gas business goes down, the electric business is going to go up. So we shouldn't really feel too sorry for them. But the gas business is going away. It's required by the laws we already have. Secondly, the cities and towns gain access to a new revenue stream beyond property taxes, like the town of Wellesley I was mentioning, which uses the surplus on its municipal light and power plant to partly fund the town's budget, and at the same time, it delivers electricity to its residents at about 17 cents per kilowatt hour, whereas most of the rest of us are stuck with National Grid and Eversource at double that. And thirdly, the residents themselves, but especially the municipal buildings and the schools, will get access to cheaper, cleaner electricity. And all of this can be achieved with no state taxes, because we are cutting the bills here. There's no requirement for new state taxes or new fees on the bills, both of which are sort of toxic politically at this point. So what we're asking you to do, if you would like to, is please write a letter of support from your town or city, addressed to your representatives, your senators and your reps, with CCing to the chairs of the TUE, that's the Transportation, Utilities and Energy Committee, which is on the Senate side chaired by Senator Barrett, and on the House side chaired by Representative Cusack, and of course to us as well, because we intend to use these letters in lobbying. Which we will be doing throughout this process. Most of the bills have now had a hearing in the TUE committee. There is one left to go, which is the climate bank bill, which is about financing all of this. Financing is kind of like a force multiplier. It runs across all of these things, and providing cheap financing is a necessary enabler of all of this. But that's not heard in TUE, that's heard in finance. We'll be doing that testimony, I think it's next week. But most of these bills go through TUE, and so we would greatly appreciate it if you would copy us on that, as well as you're addressing it to your reps and the TUE chairs. So actually, let me just open up for questions now, because we're at 10:25, and I really want to make sure we get to everyone's questions. Sarah, if there are questions in the chat, we can certainly take that. Or if people just want to ask away, that's also great.
If we go to, hi, this is David from Franklin.
Hi, David from Franklin.
If we go to solar power, this sounds wonderful. How do you handle like the power when the sun is not up? Like,
Yeah. So I have solar panels on my roof, but I maintain the connection to Eversource. So this is not going off grid. You know, that's like the wrong analogy. We're not living out in the woods in Maine somewhere. This is maintaining the connection to the grid. So you'll always have power, you'll always have the lights on. But now during the daytime, your solar panels are generating power, and that is reducing the amount of electricity you're buying from Eversource or National Grid. And so, for instance, on a sunny summer day, I personally generate about 100 kilowatt hours on that sunny summer day, but only use about 20. And so that extra 80 is exported to the grid. So all my neighbors are using my solar power, and that reduces the demand on the grid at that time. And Eversource gives me a credit on my bill. So when I export the power, they give me a credit about 27 cents for every kilowatt hour I export, and that builds up as a financial credit on my bill all throughout the summer. And then about November, it starts reversing, and I start using more power than I'm generating, and I draw down those credits, and by about March it reaches zero, and that's why I have net zero emissions for the entire year. And schools will be exactly the same thing. That you're not disconnecting the school from the grid. The school would maintain the connection to the grid. It would always have lights and power, even at night. But during the daytime, you're building up credits and using them up during the night, and then building them up again during the day, and building up enough credits during the daytime to offset the school's entire usage. And with the kind of arrays I've been talking about, large ones on schools will generate an excess. They won't just offset their current bill, they'll generate a big excess. And under current law, it's called Z metering. you can transfer the credits built up on one meter to other meters. And this is what Dover does today. It builds up credits on the solar power array over the dump. The old transfer station is now been capped off. There's solar panels over that, and half of that is transferred to the school system, reducing their electric bills directly, and half of it is given out to residents. They actually pay for it. It's not given out. It's transferred to residents. So this is all permitted by current law, except there are two barriers. One is there's a cap on the maximum amount of solar power that municipalities can install today, and that will be lifted in our bills. And secondly, there is this ban on towns transferring those cheap, clean solar power credits to their residents. That will be lifted with these bills as well. And so both of those are actually needed. You need both of those. You need to expand the limit on, lift the cap on towns installing solar panels a day. And secondly, towns need to be like everyone else, like me, like churches, like companies, be allowed to transfer those credits to their residents. Both of those things are incorporated in this bill. Did that answer your question, David?
Uh, yes, I mean, but I do know that there are things like peaker plants that are sort of behind the scenes, and I wonder how the utility affords to pay for those if they're not charging anybody for electricity anymore.
Well, that will be quite a few years from now before we get there, and most of those plants will be obsolete and decommissioned by then. But this is what happens all the time, David. You may have noticed that Massachusetts has just closed its only remaining coal-fired power station. This is creative destruction. This is what happens in a capitalist market. The high-cost suppliers of energy go out of business, and the low-cost suppliers come on. And this has been happening ever since the start of our grid based electricity distribution system, and it will carry on in the future. And this transition is not going to happen overnight. It's probably going to take at least 20 years for all of this to get done. And during that time, you will slowly, one by one, see the coal and oil-fired power stations disappear from the grid. The natural gas peaker plants will probably be the last ones to go because they are dispatchable, which means you can flick a switch and they come on. But so is hydropower. You can flick a switch and bring that on whenever you want. And these days, batteries are now so cheap that you can use a battery as a peaker plant. In other words, to fill in the little spikes in the grid. Batteries cost about 10 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity produced. The cheapest natural gas peaker plant is about 15 cents per peaker plant per kilowatt hour. So the base load power can be provided by nuclear, wind, and hydro, and then the peaker plants will be replaced by largely batteries. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have a few peaker plants around just to make everyone feel really sure that we're going to have power on all the time. But I think you're going to see the fossil fuel power generation just be overwhelmed by cheap, clean solar power and cheap, clean offshore wind and onshore wind as well.
Jane and Badri both had comments in the chat, so I'm glad that they raised their hands. So Jane.
When you say the electricity rate is 35 cents an hour, isn't that for both supply and transmission? And we're still going to have to be paying the transmission part. I think in our area, the supply is only, I think, around 17 cents. So the differential, I don't think, is as big as you're implying.
Yeah, the supply charge is typically somewhere in the 14, 15, 16 cents per kilowatt hour range. And then the rest of it is the transmission and distribution charge.
Which, if you're still connected to the grid, you still have to pay.
Yeah, and so in addition to these, the bills that release the caps on solar power and permit this transfer of net metering credits, we are also proposing what the governor is proposing, which is a reduction in the net metering rate to the supply rate, or that 14 or 15 cents per kilowatt hour. Otherwise, you're exactly right, Jane. You're actually subsidizing people who have solar panels from people who don't have solar panels. And today, that's a sort of legacy. It's part of the way that solar power was financed in Massachusetts, but that has lived its day. And really, we need to move to a system where the owners of solar panels are paid fairly for their electricity, but they're not paid for all the distribution and transmission costs, because you're absolutely right, Jane. You are using that distribution infrastructure, and so you shouldn't really be getting a net metering credit for it. You should be getting a net metering credit for the power you produce, because that means Eversource doesn't have to buy it from next year power plants. That's a fair trade. But if you don't reduce the net metering credit rate, then you do have that exact problem, Jane.
And one other comment on the peaking power plants. They do not just, even the natural gas ones, do not just come on. They emit a long time before they can actually be producing the energy, and the peakers get paid capacity payments that are millions of dollars to sit there. And yes, they have to run occasionally because they have to make sure they can run. So
Yeah.
they're polluting our air and getting paid millions for doing nothing. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Well, thank you, Jane. Those are great points. I was being nice, but
Not
you're
me.
exactly right. No, you're exactly right. The capacity factor is built into electric charge.
If I go next, hi, David. This is a good presentation. I think the clarity came around the distribution costs. I think one of the key points that I would articulate on the presentation is sources of data, which was that you have to hunt. So the way you presented it, to be honest, felt like it needed to have the details. Otherwise, people would on the lobbyist side or otherwise classify it as misrepresentation, in my opinion. We don't want to give them any particular chance. But coming to the main articles, really, I think one of the biggest bottlenecks that we need to unlock, and I don't know if there's anything in here, is mandating that the utilities finish group studies for interconnection or any other kinds of distributed energy sources coming online significantly within 90 days of application or below. The reason to do that kind of a constraint is very much because delays in group studies mean that project pipelines have extended and they do not get connected. The other benefit of having distributed rooftop solar, encouraging more rooftop solar, is going to be the reduction in large new investment in transmission and distribution at the large high voltage lines, which is also where utilities get a lot of money. But by doing this localized planned approach, they are likely to be able to get better and smaller investments required to boost up local distribution lines, such that they can distribute as it goes along. Localized energy networks, to your point about you supplying for your neighborhoods, is going to be a key differentiating and advantage point in transition. Very specifically, I think that's one aspect.
Thank you, Badri. I would like to recruit Badri and Jane to be on the team here because you both make excellent points that I think are largely in favor. But let me address each of your points in a minute, Badri. Very good points. First, about the sources of data. This is a brief presentation, okay? I don't have all the details to present to you, but they are in the written plan. The written plan is the summary of 4 different testimonies we have given. They reference specific bill numbers where language needs to be changed. They also supply the data to back up at least most of what we're saying in here. I'm a physicist by training. I have a degree in physics from Oxford University, and I'm an MBA. I got an MBA from Harvard Business School as well. So I actually understand kilowatts and kilowatt hours on the energy side. I also understand payback and financing. And so I think you'll find, Badri, when you see the detail we've got behind this plan, I think it's bulletproof. But please dig into it. If you find there are weaknesses, please let me know, because so please, if you put your email into the chat, anyone who wants to be receive the detailed version of this plan, we can email it out to you. This is exactly what we've sent to the chairs of the House and Senate TUE. And what we're trying to get the 2 of them who like to spar in public a little bit, as you saw in Commonwealth magazine recently, we're trying to get them to some sort of sensible common ground. But if you do find holes in it, Badri, I would really like to hear about it, because most of the people on this call are probably fairly in favor of the kind of things we're talking about. There are plenty of people out there who are not. There are plenty of people out there who are trying to take pot shots and undermine. And one of the key ways people do that is to undermine the credibility of the witnesses. So please, you will help us by finding the holes.
one
Yeah,
more
so
quick point before I know that you will address these, and maybe this is just me having the short version and not the detailed version. So I find faults with it without looking at the details. But I think one of the ways that I would cast this is a different manner. Rather than talk about it in purely decarbonization terms and net zero, I would strongly urge the choice of a phrase. It is in the interest of national security, environment, not environment. It is in the interest of national security for economic, energy, and environmental. You leave it at those two sequence, it takes out possibly the wind out of those who are against it, literally speaking. And it encourages us to build local life cycle chains, circular economies, including solar panel recycling capabilities that we now need to have, because that's also a distraction that people talk about, saying that it just goes to landfill. So we need to establish as part of this the first of a criteria around solar panel recycling, because the first sets of them are coming offline in the near future. So I would like to say and suggest using those 5 words, so to speak, about national security, economic energy, because it brings about economic activity also there. In that sequence, allows us to portray and say that we are building a US-based solar supply chain and life cycle. Cool.
okay, very very helpful comments, Badri. So we've been doing this for about a year now, and what we have found is the most compelling and uh um leaves you least vulnerable to attack by people who want to attack you is actually to focus on the money. And that's why you saw so much of this presentation focused on money, money saving, and not, you probably didn't hear me talk very much about global warming, didn't hear me talk very much about
Understood.
decarbonization, didn't hear me talk about net zero. That is by choice. That is by design.
Understood.
Because
Understood.
what we found is that money is the great unifier. Saving money appeals to everyone. But I do like your points about national security, by the way. And I like your alliteration, the energy, the economy, and the environment. Triple E, that's really good.
Andy has his hand up, but I will also say that I put a link to our written testimonies in the chat if anyone wants to take a look. Andy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Great presentation. Andy Platt from Acton. A two-part question, uh, and you can answer it in either order. The Wellesley example, are there any examples of towns, including Wellesley, but others, who that have actually kicked out, let's say, Eversource and have gone local? So that's one question. The second question is, my goodness, this seems like low-hanging fruit. I cannot imagine the counter arguments on this, but we better anticipate them
Yeah.
because that's what's going to do this in. This is makes so much sense on so many different levels. I'm just having a hard time knowing why we need to spend all this amount of time on this.
Well, I wish everyone was like you, Andy. I really do. I obviously see it the same way, but let me address your first point first about municipal light and power plants. So this happened about 100 years ago. Imagine Massachusetts 100 years ago. Each little town literally has its own power generation plant. Like there's a a coal-fired power plant in the center of Wellesley, and many other towns. And then Eversource and National Grid came along and they started accumulating these little towns and making them into the big utility companies you see today. But some of them are left behind. There's 41 towns in Massachusetts that have MLPs, and they feed 51 towns. And the law today says you cannot create a new, well, not cannot, it's extremely difficult to create a new MLP from scratch to sort of opt out of Eversource or National Grid. It can be done. And the way it can be done is the town has to buy out all of the electrical infrastructure in the town. That's a lot of money, right? You've got all those transformers, all those power lines. And so most towns just don't do it. It's just too expensive. But there is one recent example. There is a new town in Massachusetts. Who knows the name of the most recent new town in Massachusetts? 3, 2, 1. It's Devons, okay? The former Fort Devons was closed and a new town was created. Who runs electricity for Devons? Wellesley MLP is the answer.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So new towns can do this, but old towns are, it's very, very difficult for
Got
an
it.
existing town to do this. And I'm sure that's partly because of Eversource and National Grid don't want towns going off on their own. So that's the first thing. And the second point you made, Andy, is very good. Is that what are the counter arguments here? Well, I've presented this to two towns recently. Holliston was actually last night. Sherburne was about a week or so ago, and we had no objections in Holliston, but in Sherburne we did. And the objections was mainly around, excuse me, is this town business? Is this endorsement of legislation the rightful thing for a town to be doing? And that's a fair point. The towns have been asked in the past to endorse things like, the war in Iraq and things like that, which are, like, is that really what towns are supposed to be doing? But once I'd made the point that the average homeowner saves $2,500 every year, and if, for instance, there was a legislation on Beacon Hill that was going to raise the property tax assessment on every town in Sherburne by $2,500 every year, I think, members of the select board, you would say that was town business. So again, focusing on the money, I have found is a really powerful way to cut through opposing arguments. Recently, when we testify, we meaning members of 350 Massachusetts, but that included me, on Beacon Hill, we were sort of stalked by an advocacy group called MFA, which stands for Mass Fiscal Alliance, and they put out videos which are pretty mean, to be honest. But even with them, I think even though they are pretty much opposed to the kind of things we're talking about, when you focus on the money, it's really hard when we say, okay, so our plan saves the average homeowner $2,500 every year. What does your plan do? And there's a silence. So again, I found if you go off topic and you start talking about, well, not off topic, that's not really fair, but if you start talking about net zero and start talking about decarbonization, all of a sudden you're waving red flags at bulls, and some of them are going to come right at you. So that's why I really don't talk about that very much, although decarbonizing the economy sort of comes along for the ride. Put these new massive solar panels up, get people onto heat pumps, which heat pumps plus solar panels, your heating and your electric bills will be halved. Okay, so you're still saving money even after installing the heat pump, as long as you have solar panels. Try doing that on Eversource and National Grid price electricity, and your bills will go up 50%. Okay, but do it with cheap, clean solar power, like with solar on schools, transferring the credits, etc. Or you can do it on your own roof, like I've done. But that's how to do it. That's how to save people money. And when you keep pulling people back to, yes, I understand, but what does your plan do to save the average homeowner money each year? It's like, I can't tell you it's the it's the universal winning argument, because some people really just will argue for the sake of arguing. But I'll tell you, it's a really powerful way to build consensus.
So I just add one question or one comment, and sort of adding on to Badri's comment. I also think the argument, particularly in climate justice communities of health, is
Yeah,
another piece
yeah,
of this.
yes,
And I don't want that to totally get lost, because that's not money, but it is money, but
yeah.
it gets more personal to individuals in these communities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy. And in fact, if there's the first thing I always talk about is money, saving money, saving money, saving money. But the second thing I talk about is asthma, because again, health is universal. Like, if your kid has asthma, you need to get off cooking with gas.
Yeah.
You just need
Yeah.
to do it and that's like, that's not Republican or Democrat or independent. It doesn't really matter. It's just like the health of your kids. So that is one aspect I think is a very good um uh advantage of doing this. And then what the earlier participant was discussing about national security and economic security and job creation, those are all in the mix. But when I do a short presentation like this, I really try to focus on just the big picture stuff. But you're absolutely right. All these things are in the mix.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah.
Oh, the other David, as a
Oh,
question.
sorry. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yes, David from Franklin. I just, I love the vision and when I think of my town, though, I know we've had two attempted overrides that have failed, and money is very tight. How do you envision the financing for solar installations on schools to go forward?
Right, excellent question, David. So there are several mechanisms which are built into this campaign because obviously finance is critical. All of this stuff, heat pumps, even insulation, solar panels, it's money up front that saves you money over time. So it's an investment, it's a finance problem. And in fact, I think that's a large part of what I personally bring to this debate is I'm a finance guy. You know, I've spent a career in business, got a Harvard MBA, I've raised over $100 million in different types of financing throughout my career. So I think that's really an element I bring to this. So there are several mechanisms for financing built into this. The first one was a proposal by the governor called inclusive utility investment. And basically what this means is the utility will provide the money, will lend you the money, and you will repay it on your utility bill. And this is aimed at both homeowners, so individuals like all of us, and also at anyone who has an electric bill, like a school. So anyone could participate in this. It's a very convenient way of doing the financing, and if you do it right, like you do the insulation and you do the heat pumps and you do the solar panels, then the total bills, even after the financing repayments, go down. Okay. Now you have to do it right. Right, you can't just go randomly and adding stuff, but do it right according to a plan that's financially focused. And you add the insulation to reduce the energy load. You heat with heat pumps rather than fossil fuel, which are 3 times as efficient as fossil fuel furnaces. And then you power those heat pumps with cheap electricity. That is the magic that gets you to lower bills, even including the interest and the principal payments on that loan to your utility companies. That's number one. That's called inclusive utility financing. It's not actually part of any of our bills. It's part of the governor's proposal. And of course, right now we're in that phase where the governor, the House, and the Senate are starting to duke it out a bit about what's going to be in this bill. It's very clear that the governor's proposal is the starting point. Both the House and the Senate have made that clear. They're working from the governor's proposal, and the governor's proposal includes a very large section on this inclusive utility financing. That's number one, okay? Number two is the climate bank. The climate bank already exists. It was established a few years ago under forget the governor's name now, but it was established about 5 years ago. And what this that was established under a grant under the Biden administration for $50 million to set up the bank. And the way the bank works is it lends you the money very, very cheaply. The highest interest rate is 2%. The lowest interest rate is 0.5%. 0.5% is for low income, 2% is sort of for everybody else. And it lends you the money for 20 years and it takes a secondary mortgage on your house. So when you sell your house, you pay off the bank first, you pay off any loan outstanding to the climate bank second, and then the rest is your equity in the house. And because it has that subordinated mortgage position, it has very cheap financing. It's a bit like having a mortgage versus having a credit card. Whereas today you can borrow money to do these things on your house, but you're going to pay 8, 9, 10% personal loan interest rates. You're not going to pay 2%. So the climate bank it already exists. It exists under executive authority. It does not exist under legislation. And the testimony I'll be giving next week is about making the climate bank permanent. And that will allow it to raise far more money and then issue far more loans. And those will be even cheaper than my estimate of what the the interest rates will be on inclusive utility financing. There's just a limit to how low those interest rates can be because Eversource and National Grid borrow in the public markets at about 5.5%. So it's going to be really hard for them to be lending money to you at less than 5.5%. However, the climate bank is more like a government entity. It's more like Massport or the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. It has state authority to issue state bonds, and those are at about 3.5%. So it has a much lower cost of financing, and hence it can give out cheaper loans than the inclusive utility financing model. So that is the second part of this bill. It's the climate bank. which I'll be testifying on next week. Plus, there's that inclusive utility financing. So I do believe financing in general is what we call a force multiplier. It really applies to everything. It helps you get heat pumps. It helps you get solar panels. It helps a school to get solar panels. It helps a business to get solar panels and heat pumps. So it's really kind of a force multiplier. And that's why we're testifying on that next week in the Finance Committee, because that bill is not heard by the Telecommunications, Utilities and Energy Committee, which is where most of the rest of the bills, about all the rest of the bills are being heard. So there's sort of a two-pronged attack here. There's finance and there's the TUE. But yeah, finance is a key part of this. And I think those two proposals, the inclusive utility investment and the climate bank, are the best ways to address this and address financing.
Great. Mark?
Did that answer your question, David?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Mark?
Yes, thank you. Hi, David. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to make one comment and maybe one question, and tying David's question and some of Andy's comments together. I'm also from Franklin. In Franklin, I'm going to restate what David said. We've had 2 attempted override votes in the last 2 years. Franklin is really struggling as a municipality with finances and budgets over the last several years, and I believe we are not that different from many other municipalities around Massachusetts. So I think putting the financial savings in the context of each town's current issues, it makes a lot of sense to try to get people to pay attention to these dollars in savings. My question refers to the earlier discussions between you and Badri about the total cost of a kilowatt hour, separating the generation charge from the delivery charges. And it occurs to me, maybe some of us on the phone, on the call right now, are newly enjoying a reduced delivery rate if you're using heat pumps, for example, to heat your homes, right?
Yeah.
And it occurs to me, and the justification for that, I believe, at least part of the justification was heat pump users are not putting the additional demand on the system during the summer months, so heat pump users shouldn't have to pay the full cost of maintaining and growing that network, that distribution network. Why wouldn't that same argument hold for solar generators?
Well, it actually does, because there are now large-scale academic studies that show that if you personally, Mark, if you install solar panels on your roof, your bill goes down. But the studies show everyone else's bills go down too, because what you're doing is contributing electricity to the grid at the time when it's the peak. The peak power on the grid is a hot, sunny summer afternoon. And that's when, as Jane was saying, those dirty, expensive, polluting natural gas peaker plants are brought onto the grid to meet that final little few megawatts of demand. But if you put solar on your roof, you are not using that electricity, using your own electricity, and that reduces the peak price for everyone. And this is now very well established. Lots of academic studies have proven this. So you're exactly right. Solar panels in the peak of summertime, solar panels reduce the peak cost of electricity to everyone. Let's go back to the 6 cents per kilowatt hour. That is a new thing that was established by the Department of Public Utilities this year. If anyone is on Eversource or National Grid or Unitil electricity and has heat pumps, please call your utility and ask for the 6 cents per kilowatt hour discount. That discount applies not only to your heat pump usage, but it applies to all your electric usage from November to April. This is a very good deal and a very good reason to get heat pumps, because it'll knock off your entire electricity bill. It will reduce your entire electricity bill. For the average homeowner, it actually saves about $500 a year. So it's not bad. It's substantial. So if anyone's got heat pumps, please contact your utility and get that extra 6 cents discount. But you're absolutely right, Mark. That was partly justified on the basis of the fact that the peak is in the summer. So bringing more electricity onto the grid in wintertime doesn't change the distribution infrastructure. It's the same distribution infrastructure, we're just using it more effectively. So that's part of the reason why that discount was permitted for heat pump users because they're not actually straining the grid. They're not adding new substations, new power lines, new transformers, etc. That was part of the justification. And I think you're exactly right. You can kind of flip that and say, well, for solar panels, you see the same thing. You see this displacement of very expensive electricity generators off the grid, and that allows everybody's price to go down.
Any chance that we can see that become part of a new legislative bill, something like that?
What do you mean?
Seeing a delivery rate, a special delivery rate established for solar users,
Well,
solar generators.
I
so
don't
so
I
it
don't think
already
that
exists.
would.
It already exists, Mark. It's called the net metering compensation rate. When you
Oh,
export, so for instance, when I export excess solar power in the summertime, I might generate 100 kilowatt hours on a good sunny day. I use 20, so I'm exporting 80. I get a credit of 27 cents per kilowatt hour. So I'm effectively getting both the supply rate compensation and the distribution compensation,
okay.
even though I'm not using the distribution, right? So I'm getting paid for that. So that effectively is what you were saying. Now, that is not
Okay.
sustainable. That is not sustainable. As solar grows, you'll just bankrupt the utilities because ordinary ratepayers who don't have solar are subsidizing people who do have solar. And that's why part of our bills actually phases down that net metering compensation rate from, say, 26 cents a day to about 14 cents, which is, as Jane pointed out, is the supply rate today. And at that supply rate, there's no cross subsidy, so it's sustainable for the long term.
All right. Thank you, David.
I'm putting a link in the chat. Sheldon Whitehouse did a great video showing how the
It is very good. It's very good.
really good. Badri?
Yes, David, thanks for the conversation and to the previous person from Franklin also on that. I think net zero works out. And obviously the rate reduction for going forward would be necessary, but also could mean that just like California, we would have to incentivize local batteries at homes, and that will also mean that those who can financially afford it first will be the ones to make up for the volume and the scalability of these solution set. I had a couple more comments, David Green. I think you should consider this, or we need to foster this. Your analysis of $2,500 savings happens only with a home that is on heat pumps plus solar panel, specifically. Many homes do not have the ability to handle. You may be lucky in 15 kilowatt DC panels on your rooftop. I'm not so lucky where I put in 10 years ago, it's only 5 kilowatt DC. And even if I upgraded my panels in 10 plus years, I may get 7.5
Right.
kilowatts
Yeah.
after all the fire codes. So I
Yep.
think that model fails out a little bit, but the importance is that when you do street planning, you have to have the ability for the towns to build maybe a nuanced right. It's an execution thing and not necessarily a legislative thing, maybe, but to communicate that towns should begin to put in infrastructure and capability around maintaining an interest list of people, an asset list when it's going on, right? So that is something that I'm trying to think about here in Chelmsford, is to create a pipeline of interest so that you can go through a Groupon exercise every year to convert people over time, number one. Number two, I think when you talked about pricing at the community energy units or something like energy formation units or something like that, and how the
Clean energy
pricing,
utilities.
yeah, energy utilities. The pricing structure that you ended up showing was like there's a 10 cents at the production rate, and today you charge 17 cents, and the town can transfer it at a price point in between. One of the key things the pricing is maintained at today is it's tied to natural gas very much. And that's one of the reasons why electricity pricing is always variable, and people just write PPAs that says minus 10% to basic rate or whatever the number is that comes out. Boom. And today, over 200, I don't know how many communities, but maybe about 100 communities already offer community choice. The nuance there is going to be the key point in highlighting where the arbitrage and who sets the arbitrage point is going to be a good play, because towns may see that if we are able to now set the price point, they may use the PPA approach of saying, I don't transfer 50% savings. I may only save 20% because the rest I can use it as tax dollars, revenue streams when we are all
Yep.
hurting. So just pointing that particular thing. So it's
Yep.
important to figure out what are we going to do for homes that do not have solar very specifically
Yep.
because of their roof construction points, right?
Yeah, I own one of them, Badri, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
And the answer to that, so let me just go back to the top. So you're absolutely right. The $2,500 in annual savings for the average home in Massachusetts, which is about 1,800 square feet, 4 bedroom, with a reasonably sunny roof. But that's not based off full sun. That's based off about 85% sun on the roof. Um, and when you add solar and insulation and heat pumps, then you save $2,500 every year. That is clearly not available to everyone. Some people have chopped up roof lines with hips and dormers and things like that, which makes them ineligible for solar. And some people just have shady roofs and they're not willing to cut down trees to increase the sun on the roofs. That is why we need community sourced solar. And that is why
Understood.
schools have a big role in this, because schools can put big arrays up that cost less to install than it does on 1,000 homes. Um, they can put in as much power as they want, essentially. Like I mentioned, the Dover Sherburne school system could put in enough solar panels on the parking lots and the roofs of the flat roofs of the buildings to power half the town. And then they can transfer that. And as you said, Badri, that there is a debate there about what that transfer price should be. Um, Wells, the MLP, as an example, runs at a profit. Now the
Right.
profits go to the town. So it's
Right.
like, okay, but those profits essentially reduce the property tax assessment. That's essentially what they do. But it's up to the town to choose. Does the town simply act as a pass-through entity and transfer those credits at cost, or does it run it like a little business and the profits of those business go to the town, and the town then uses that profits to either fund its current expenses or reduce property tax revenues. But whatever that decision is, Badgery, it's the town's decision. It's the people of
Understood.
that town who make that decision. So I'm,
Understood.
I'm very comfortable with the sort of democratic control
Understood.
of the process.
Understood. I'm just highlighting that
Yeah,
point of
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
contention, detractors, and others that come into that.
yep,
There's
you're
one more
absolutely right, Badgery. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
one more point that I would like to address, and as this is because I just got my first quote for a heat pump, I cannot put a central heat. I have central forced hot air, and I can't put a central unit for heat pump. I have to go likely room by room distributed panels, and I can't have the perception of having an overhead unit, right? So I have to access through the attic or other kinds of things. What it means is that there's a value for perception. When homes get valued by real estate agents and how we do that, we've got to figure out a way. Again, it may not be legislative, but maybe we have to talk about it through some certain not incentives or tipping functions, if possible, that allow for multiple levels of incentives. One could be the more solar a town puts, there is more aid available for XYZ reason. I don't know what it is, but let's assume that XYZ, especially if it's EJ communities or otherwise, what can be done there? That there needs to be a tipping function. Why? Because that starts the fact that Massachusetts has about 30 gigawatts of solar power capacity, according to the Mass Audubon Harvard study, and it includes existing rooftop rather than going greenfield. So how do you incentivize rooftop solar, maximize it? Number one. Number two, how do you value homes that are heat pump based with these newfangled structures and people having a jarring reaction to it? Because initially, a lot of people have said, and even today, I hear people say, oh, solar on rooftop looks ugly, right? And that's a common conversation to happen, so to speak. And so pushing for normalization of those through either the real estate network, realtors network, getting some support from them, saying that we tend to think about that and highlight that as a operating total cost of operation incentive or total cost of operation advantage that we put it in is another mechanism that we need to enable through recognition in the real estate process.
Okay, so I heard three questions there about it. Let me just take them each in turn.
Sure.
I don't know who's giving you advice that you can't do a heat pump if you've got forced hot air, But I suggest, but let's
No,
take
no.
this offline, Barry. Let's take
Yeah,
this
yeah, we'll
offline.
do that.
This is about municipalities, not about your house.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
take that offline. But I'll be happy to help you on that. I've decarbonized my house. I've helped about 50 other people do it. I'd be happy to help you on that one. But that's the question. Second one. Tying the funding to EJ communities and status, a lot of this is actually built into the Mass Save 25-27 plan. Um, and there are specific pieces of this legislative package that focus more on EJ and low income communities than on wealthy communities. So I would say it's at least partly
Okay.
addressed. I can't tell you it's sort of
Okay.
perfect, but I think at least there is a will to move in that direction and make sure that disadvantaged communities, gateway communities that have been sort of left out, particularly from Mass Save, get get special preference. Particularly, let me just give one little example. So in the climate bank, its loan interest rate for low income people is 0.5% a year. I
Yeah.
mean, it's almost free money. I mean, inflation's 2.5, 3%. So that is essentially a better. They're paying
Mhm.
you to take
Yes.
that loan. So that there are lots of ways in which this whole program, solar panel, heat pumps, insulation funding, really is directed more favorably towards low income EJ gateway communities. But I can't tell you it's perfect, Battery. I think it's more that there are components pushing in that direction. But what is lacking, in my opinion, is actually an integrated package. That's really what's lacking. Is like there's
Understood.
bits
Yes.
out there, but
That
they're
is,
not pulled together.
yes. Yes. I agree on that. One quick point that I would say when you brought up about the Mass Save, I just read it today somewhere on LinkedIn, maybe, but I think House TU Chair, I forget the rep's
Cusack, yeah,
name,
Cusack.
Cusack, seems to be indicating that the social cost of greenhouse gases will be eliminated from the calculations. And I think if you were to give testimony and you have the opportunity to give the testimony next week, I would encourage you to reaffirm that the social price of carbon or greenhouse gases should be kept up to date with IPCC as a linked number rather than with arbitrary numbers that we say speak. Because without that, the economic shift model of valuing garbage versus something else is not going to be able to
Yep.
move the needle.
So your wish will come true, Badri. I will be mentioning that in my testimony
Okay,
next
thank
week.
you.
But just step back and look at what's really going on here. Um, what I think Rep Cusack is not really seeing very clearly at this point is that Senator Barrett wrote that bill.
Right.
Senator Barrett wrote the bill that commits Massachusetts to net zero by 2050 and lays out those goals of the 5-year goals to get us there. Um, I think Senator Barrett is going to fight tooth and nail for
Mhm.
this. And if you've watched the Mass legislature, from afar, Barrett is a really tough negotiator. I mean, he forced the House into a major compromise last year. The House wanted a whole bunch of reforms around electricity siting reforms, and the Senate wanted a lot of this stop the gas companies ripping up the streets kind of stuff that is now in the current bills really enacted at the town level. But the enabling legislation was really what Senator Barrett fought for last year, and he has a reputation as being tough as nails. So I'm not too distressed by this
Okay,
right now. But I will be including that in my testimony next week. So
thank you.
thank you for raising that.
Stephen
Oh,
has a
wait, just one other thing. Just want to get to the other point you made about the value of real estate. There are large-scale academic studies, including one done by Zillow, that look at houses side by side, apples to apples houses. The only thing is that this one has solar panels and this one doesn't. And the answer is the house price increases by between 4 and
Understood.
7%.
Understood, but there are still a lot of people who don't value that
Oh
the
yeah.
same way. So I'm saying, and standardizing it or having if not an incentive, a tipping function that says thou shall consider that favorably in terms of total cost of operations is a better, slightly better nomenclature. Or maybe it's just for us in the community to keep on arguing for that with our
Well, what I'm telling
representatives.
you, Badger, is it's in the marketplace. I mean, whether people should or shouldn't do it, they do. They do value houses with solar panels and heat pumps. The academic research again shows it's between 4 and 7% for having a heat pump. It's between 4 and 7% increase in price for having
Very
solar
nice.
panels. So the market has already determined that heat pumps and solar panels are really valuable. Why are they valuable? Because they cut the bills. And
Right.
when you cut the bills, so you got two houses identical to each other, but one has low bills and one has high bills. Which one are you going to pay more for?
Right. Okay. I'm
Jane
good.
had,
Yes.
but Stephen had a question in the chat. He says, do you have a list of schools that have rooftop solar farms for town use? Also testimonials from them we could use in talking to our municipalities. I'm from Franklin, where the under construction new Tri-County Vocational School is including this.
So what is the question again, Sarah?
In the chat, do you have a list of schools that have rooftop solar farms for town use? Also testimonials from them we could use in talking to our municipalities.
So I do not have a list of schools. I do know anecdotally that Medfield, Massachusetts, has done it. I know Lexington Concord has done it. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if just doing a Google search would turn up quite a few schools, but I do not have a list I can just give to you on that. I am actually looking for those kind of testimonials that you just described. I've actually found it quite hard to find towns that actually understand the economics. Unfortunately, what's happened in a lot of these cases is the towns, in my opinion, have been sort of seduced by companies like Amoresco, who come to the town and say, we will put solar panels over your schools, no cash down, and you will get a reduction in your, let's say, school's electric bill, all of which is true and is very easy to get through town meeting. But what they're not telling you is the bulk of the profits are going to Amoresco. And if you actually finance it yourself, let's say, I'll take a worst case scenario, a town issues municipal bonds to pay for solar panels over the roof and pays, say, 3.5% interest on those municipal bonds, they would save far more money than paying Amoresco to do it all for them. And this is part of our campaign is to reform Mass Save so that Mass Save has a group of technical experts who will handhold a homeowner through the process of, do you add heat pumps? Do you add geothermal? Do you add solar panels? Making the right decisions, financially driven for the homeowner. That's a part of Mass Save reform. In addition, those same kind of technical experts will be a group of those will be for towns, specifically to address the kind of issues that towns face and really take companies like Amoresco, who I think are offering very bad deals for towns. But towns accept them because, hey, no cash down. I can get that through town meeting, and we're saving on electric bills, this tiny little rounding error amount. I can get that through town meeting, but what you're actually giving up is these huge cost savings that are potential that are there if you add solar panels yourselves and either pay for them. The worst case scenario would be a town issues its own debt to pay for the solar panels, which would then be paid off in 5, 6 years. But probably the more likely solution is the Massachusetts School Financing Authority, which today is the state funding authority that issues bond funding to fund big improvements in schools. That is more likely to become the way that towns would finance this, or the climate bank. If we get the Mass School Financing Authority exists already today, so that's very easy to access. I think the climate bank is a better solution because it will offer cheaper loans by having that secondary mortgage on the property, and is structured to really be the lowest cost loan provider possible, and it already has these discounts built in, 0.5% per year for low income, 2% for everyone else. So I think the climate bank is probably the best way to go. But that municipal bond funding is always an option, or the inclusive utility investment. And someone earlier raised the issue in Franklin where you've had failed debt override votes. That is precisely where I think inclusive utility investment comes into play. You don't need a debt override. You don't need to issue municipal bonds. Those are, generally speaking, the cheapest ways to do it, but not everyone has that access. And so still providing a way for towns to save money, but incorporating the financing from the utility company, I think will become a good option for towns like Franklin that have difficulty passing debt overrides.
Jane.
I just wanted to push one other thing with Mass Save reform. I live in the city of Pittsfield, Mass, where the difference in lifespan amongst census tracts is 12 and a half years. We're all one zip code, but 12 and a half year different life expectancy among census tracts. And we have not, after decades, been able to get Mass Save to make the utilities report by census tract. Please, if we could get everybody to push that, it would make such a difference.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Very good point. I've not heard that before, but it makes total sense. I mean, doing census tract by census tract. I mean, utilities know what it is, house by house.
And they won't do it. And we've been
Right.
begging for well, yeah,
Who's we,
decades.
Jane? Who's we?
Well, all sorts of people going to the 3-year energy efficiency reform
Okay.
things, but starting with Berkshire Environmental Action Team. But there, lots and lots of us have been pushing, and that's one of the things we just cannot get through.
Right. All right. Thank you. Good point.
I think that's all the questions, David.
Well, fabulous. If anyone has any follow-up questions, please send me an email. I think I sent. Well, if so, didn't have time to set up registration of this event, so we don't know who you all are. So if you want to stay in touch, please, Sarah, would you mind just putting your email, or I'll put mine in as well if you like, into
Oh, you
the
put
chat.
yours in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, just so you have a way to contact us, because as someone said earlier on the call, this is sort of obvious. And in the town meetings, not town meetings, sorry, the town select board meetings I've been to so far, I mean, everyone's seeing it the same way. It's like, what's the problem here, you know? So I think this is a huge step up in both power and money, for municipalities, towns, and cities across the state. So I do think we'll get a lot of people like on this call being in favor of this. If you are in favor of this, please write a letter to your reps and senators. Please, and CC the chairs of the Telecommunications Utilities Energy Committee, and please CC us, so we can keep track of it. Because I envision a day when I go to Beacon Hill and I testify on something, and I get to a point and I reach into my briefcase and I pull out a sheaf of papers and I say, reps and senators, these represent the towns and cities across Massachusetts, and they all urge you to pass these bills. And I do think that testimony coming from towns and cities will be very powerful in getting the money and the power that I think you all want.
David, this is Carolyn. I have most of the emails of everybody
Excellent.
who, but there are one or two people who I don't.
So if you're interested, please send us an email so we can keep track of it all. And if you have further questions as you address your select boards or town councils, please let us know. As you can tell, I am both an energy geek and a finance nerd, and I'm very happy to answer people's questions if that's going to make a difference in getting your select board to endorse this action.
David, what's your email? I can put it in the chat.
It's David, David, L as in Lester, C as in Christopher, Green, GREEN at gmail.com. David L. C. Green at gmail.com.
David L.C. There you go. I think I got that right.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yep, you got it right.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.